meaning that it's very often three brothers and their friend, rather than, sort of, I've seen furniture companies and they had like no female executives. Who buys furniture? You're asking them, have any of you guys ever bought a piece of furniture in your life? So you have kind of contradictions like that. But what is tremendous is, the technical talent in Spain. And, I was working again in electronic arts, and one of the reasons was the guy, because the communication skills were really poor. In other words, the guy I was working with, his English wasn't good, he wasn't very confident, he didn't have the way in meetings to explain what he needed. So by the time the video game would come over from Vancouver, it was in a mess. So he had to be an absolute genius to somehow pull it all together. And so it's quite remarkable. I remember meeting the guy years ago and I said, "You're far too good to be working here." And I got him, helped him, or at least encouraged him and connected him to get a job in one of the big American companies. And right now developers are like prima donnas. They're walking around like $150,000, and if you're not, looking like you're hitting the NASDAQ within 6 months, they walk across the road. And they're, and you have, just as good talent, I would say. You can get good talent in Spain for as little as 25,000 and versus 150,000, and a lot less of the attitude. So that's kind of the thing that, American VCs looking at Spanish. But it's changing because they're seeing successes, and the Spanish teams are getting better at pitching. I think I heard Liz downstairs saying, like, don't ever start by apologizing, sorry for my English. I really, you still hear it kind of thing. And, my Spanish is dodgy and I still go on TV, and like, my wife looks at me as if to say, like, no hablas bien. And I'm like, I don't care. They understand what I'm saying. And, there's no perfect version of English. It's a bit like that. So those are sort of what I'm seeing. Very much that it's getting better, but that the Spanish ecosystem has to promote itself more. I mean, until recently, there wasn't even a blog about technology in Spanish. You now have Nuevo Brief, which is excellent. And Tech EU also covers Spain pretty good. But investors are very, they ultimately, it's quite interesting. I mean, it's interesting also, I tell a story, like probably the #1 researchers in the world in the fields of cancer, AIDS, and HIV are all Spanish guys, So when I'm pitching hotels, that's the first thing I say, But again, you don't read about these scientists in the newspapers, You don't read about, I don't know what you do read in the newspapers, but, so that's sort of what you have to start with. You have to start with excellence. Start by pushing excellence, and then get them interested in the story, and then try and find often a connection. Jeff Bezos, his grandfather was from, I think, Valladolid or somewhere, There's Mark Andreessen's wife, her father was from the Basque Country. There's lots, I mean, this is in Ireland what we do really, really well. Like, you have an Irish name, we make that connection. So, but I'm very hopeful about just because a lot of VCs are, and the other thing, actually I mentioned this today, there's in VCs now and in companies, there is an emerging layer of executives whose parents came from Mexico. So they speak good enough Spanish. And those guys are much easier to pitch. I mean, one of the reasons I came to Spain was I was living in Mexico, or in Dallas, Texas, and the only people having fun seemed to be speaking Spanish. And so I kind of went, hey, I got to do this. And, it's really interesting now how I find myself when I'm in the States talking to a Javier or a Pablo or, you know, or someone who's like that. And it's always a good conversation starter, which is like, you know, oh, in Spain. And he's like, yeah, I'd love to go there. And, you know, I speak Spanish. So that's helping a lot as that class of executives are rising. They're more interested in a Spanish story. So all of the right things are good, but until there's like a huge exit story, like until there's like, you know, a Spanish company on the NASDAQ, you know, that's the thing when they'll really go. Okay, very long, but it's something I'm trying to encourage everyone, in particular this idea of pushing each other's, you know, just because you don't know personally a company you admire, that doesn't mean you can't talk about them. You can absolutely say, you know what, there's a fantastic company in Barcelona doing this. And even though you don't know the guy, you're still helping them. And we all, you know, rise. We rise together as any form of excellence. Okay, great question. Any more questions?
I have one related
Sure.
to the topic.
Yes.
And it is the following. Who do you have to get in contact with in order to get people to use your API? Or they directly start using it because you provide an excellent service that they are interested in?
Well, yes. I mean, both ways, but you have to go and sell to them. Here's the thing that we find I found in Hot. Big companies especially have what's called the roadmap, right? I'm sure anyone who's worked in the technology knows what the roadmap is. And basically that's your technology resources and your budget and what you're allowed to touch. And different parts of the company want to add functionality to their apps. So you could have a company that has 20 apps. You could have a company that has different websites that sell different things. Or even, I mean, Amazon.com isn't one website. It's basically could be as much as 800 different websites that are separately maintained that just all come together under the banner. So one of the things that we found in Hot is that lots of people wanted to add our functionality, but couldn't do it themselves because of the roadmap. In other words, the guy would say, you know, we have coders that can build this, but I can't get access to them for 9 months because all our technical people right now are committed to adding this other piece of functionality. So you go to them and you say, we have an API that does what you need. And they can add an API because that probably doesn't involve a roadmap approval. That just involves a sort of a testing thing. So, but that's what you have to do, is that you have to identify, that's just opportunity recognition. So what you have to do is see, and very often it's something you want yourself. So you're looking at, you know, Manube, or you're looking at a product, and you're saying like, I wanted to do this with your app, but I couldn't do it. And you're saying, so if you have an API, you can sell to them. A lot of product managers, particularly people who don't have technical backgrounds, are unaware, like, of the basic technologies that enable what they do. It surprises me, you know, a lot of the time if you came up under a generation, you know, I worked for a while in airlines where we used assembler second generation languages. And even the airline systems now are still using 2GLs, you know, so they're literally almost writing, you know, sort of, you know, assembler level language. So that's one of the things. So they mightn't necessarily be aware, but that's your job as an entrepreneur, right? Your job is to identify, you know, to see someone who has traffic, and you sell them, I have an API that will enable you to do this. and it's a revenue share thing. You say, look, you let me do this, and we split the revenue, and that's it. But that's classic opportunity recognition. That's what you have to do. Okay, more questions? Just watching the time. So I think in terms of what I've said, the things I want to emphasize a lot are the API for the technical people. Like, you really got to watch that. That's where the opportunities lie. In terms of promotion, be very careful of paid promotion. I've seen not so good results. That doesn't mean that don't use it. Just be very careful. Lots of people have put a lot into it, and yes, they've got the downloads, but the downloads didn't stick, or something like that. Or yes, they've got up and moved places up in the App Store, but it didn't stick. And so just be careful of that. UI and UX, again, this idea that if you raise money, a UX designer, user experience designer, will really add value above an awful lot of things. A UX is well worth their money. The idea of mobile and the mobile environment, just understand that it's not just transaction anymore. Mobile is a completely different environment, with location, with different security. There's this thing called slow, low mo, social, local, mobile. This idea of being a completely different experience. This idea of, you're seeing it more and more. Literally, you pull out your phone and you can click one button to get an answer to your problem. The web was never built like that. The web was just built to make something that was previously done on paper and telephone more efficient. So what mobile has an entirely different way of thinking about business. So I would say that, even, web it's like a difference between a car and a motorbike, or, an airplane and a helicopter. They're both modes of transport, but really think differently. And then in terms of building an app, just to be aware that, Apple is tough, but there are reasons for it. You can probably have a higher spend on Apple, even though there are more people with Android phones. But that's changing now because the Android experience is getting so much better. And you should probably, I know many entrepreneurs that actually have two phones. They have an Android and an iPhone, because the experience is so different. And when you can move between apps like you can on Android, and you see that kind of thing happening, you're like, why isn't the iPhone like this? And then you get that whole thing about, have they stopped innovating? Have they, when was the last wow product that they ever built? So that's quite interesting. But at least Android are now providing tools, and then the final thing is just to remember that the back end, it's not, the app isn't just what you physically see. The back end is, so, very often the startups have two Android developers, two iOS developers, and a back end person. That would be so you don't just have one developer of each, like the way the back end is done. And lots of acquisitions companies that come to look at you in terms of acquisition will look at your back end much more so than anything else. Because if you have sort of legacy information about your customers, it's extremely useful. In many ways, it's extremely useful because it was from before they became aware of it. So in many cases, a lot of people have given up data about their behavior and then only kind of lately found out that this was happening and that they've had to stop it. So you can actually have an awful lot of really good information about your users. So that's a sort of, that's an issue. So how are we for time? Are we, ¿cómo vamos? Okay? Entonces, on time. Okay, I tried to. Just in terms of hot hotels, I can't emphasize anymore enough. Oops. So please go to hot.co.uk, hot.es, camera, pointing towards hot. I can't say it enough times. Hot meaning first part of hotels. And we are Europe's largest last-minute hotel booking system. We're in 53 countries, 320 cities, and we have about 4,000 hotels on the system. And we're based in Marbella. Okay, thanks a lot.
Now, what we are doing is to hear, well, you were next to tell your project and to tell us.
Yeah,
Yes.
you want me to?
So if you want to share the project with us and we can give you feedback or
Sure.
anything, so you are the next.
Mhm.
And prepare the words.
Sure, yeah. Está siempre complicado. Ok, apago este. Y apago este. Deck. Sure.
¿Tienes bolsillos?
Sí.
Un bolsillito. Espera, ¿tienes cinturón? No. Bueno, ahí, mira, en este, sí. Continúa. Qué complicadas soy las mujeres, yo con lo fácil que somos los chicos. Vale, pásatelo por debajo del pañuelo y te lo engancho por aquí.
Vale, perfecto.
Si te molesta o algo me lo dices, ¿vale?
Vale. Well, first of all, I want to say why am I here. I love business. I love interact with other companies. I love find synergies with other projects or with other entrepreneurs. And I am also very creative. So I like to be involved in those ways. And why I became an entrepreneur, because I can do what I like, business, and also be creative, create a project by myself. And one day, an idea came out, and I decided to carry out with a very qualified team. And the idea, as you know, because I told you before, is to do digital receipts. For me, the best or the main reason was to solve a problem in the society, was to do something to become better of the society. And I think that the receipt is something that is a problem that all of us have. I mean, for example, if we are going shopping or we are going to a restaurant or something, what will we do with our receipt if we have to carry on a physical ticket or a physical paper that maybe once in 2 years or maybe in a month we will need it and we are not going to find it, or we have to be very careful with it. So I decided to do an APP because, as the professor told us, in the mobile world, digital is very enthusiastic and very dynamic, you know. So to save your tickets in your mobile, for me, was a challenge. And it's a challenge that I'm very glad to be sharing with you today. And it's a challenge that I would like to become a reality. You know? We don't have a logo yet, but we will try to figure out a logo in nowadays. So well, this is our business plan, and well, as I told you, is something that will better the experience of buying for the company. So that is something that's why we want to sell it to the companies. It's not an app. Of course, it will be an app that the customers will download it, but our client will be the companies, the business, the stores, some business that wants to be different than other business doing this thing, no? Trying to make a difference in their sales. How does it work? Well, our clients will be the commerce, will enter in a platform that could do these receipts digitally. And then the clients of these stores will download the app, and in the cloud, they will find the receipt. So it's something really, really simple. I mean, I don't want to complicate my mind doing like different things or something really difficult. I mean, it's really simple. You can download it, and with a great user experience also, you can find something like that. Well, we have already talked about this already, about the solution B2C and the solution B2B. Both parts are involved.